2 of a 4-part series on preparing to pre-fish for a tournament at Roosevelt Lake in September. Please enjoy. Hello, I'm Joe Michels, the owner of Fish Point, and this is our media channel. Welcome. So now let's talk about fishing the jungle vertically, and what do I mean by that? So you're going to have an awful lot of flooded brush, flooded trees, you're going to find green trees, and remember the green trees in either end of Roosevelt Lake is going to provide shade. And when the sun gets up, sometimes that shade is a place to focus and concentrate on. One way to fish that, if they're not wanting that horizontal presentation, reaction baits, if you will, is to throw the bait into the tree. So there are some baits I'm going to use and talk about that I've used in the past and have done very well catching 3 and 4 pound fish doing this technique, which is basically flipping, but really what it is pitching. Really what we do most of the time is take the bait and we pitch it into the water at the target. So let me first talk about finding the right type of structure to throw at, because when you go into these ends of the lakes, it's going to be overwhelming. So one of the things I look for is green trees, okay? Let's just go on to the next thing, which is a difference. Like you're going along and you're seeing just acres and acres of bushes that are flooded, they're sticking this far out of the water or this far out of the water. How do you separate? Well, one of the things you need to do is maybe you find some of the trees that have a bigger base. Instead of spindly little bushes, they'll have a bigger base. And in the past, I've noticed that sometimes larger fish will use the base of those trees as ambush points. So bigger fish, by the way. So keep that in mind. Another thing to think about is bushes that are out of place. In other words, you have a certain type of bush everywhere, and all of a sudden there's a different bush, okay? That different bush, that was one single different bush, flooded bush, if you will, amongst all the other ones might be the thing that's holding the fish. Use that to dissect an area, okay? The best thing to do, obviously, is to get them eating reaction baits, and you can locate, let's say, larger schools of fish, and then when they stop eating reaction, you can then, move to pitching and flipping to get access to more bites. Okay, so first of all, I want to talk about Tournament Legend Power Flipping Rod. It is 7'11". It's a heavy action rod. It has a moderate fast tip, a little bit slower tip. It's interesting in a flipping stick, but I can tell you I love how that feels, okay? Now, what I have already set up here is a bait. So this is probably a 3/4 ounce weight. That's kind of a big weight, maybe for what I'm going to do at Roosevelt, but maybe not. Sometimes, because the water's still warm, right, that the thing to think about is dropping the baits in there and having the bait move fast. Sometimes that'll trigger a bite. So you're throwing in a heavy cover, the bait's moving fast, and voila, you'll get a strike. When I'm pitching and flipping in this heavy cover, I'm always going to use a bobber stopper. Here I have it slid up pretty far, but you can slide it right down here. That keeps the weight together with the bait, if you will, as it goes down, right? Notice this bait. This is a kind of a pretty good sized bait, and it's also a June bug color. I love June bug when the water is stained, that you can see maybe 10 inches or 12 inches, something like that, 13, 14 inches. And especially when the sun is high, because that June bug color just stands out. I don't know, by the way, if I'm going to throw this when I get up there, because I don't know the watercolor. But if the watercolor is, stained enough, I may give this a shot, because it's certainly a great color. June bug is just a great color to have tied on. Now, some other baits I'm going to use is a regular sized brush hog. This is not a baby brush hog, it's a regular sized one. This happens to be watermelon, if you will, and it's got green and orange fleck. Again, I'm trying to think about bluegills. What I'm going to do with this bait, if I'm going to fish it, is I'm going to put a little chartreuse here on the ends, right? And that'll give it more of a bluegill representation. I'm going to use a pretty stout hook, because I'm going to be throwing this into pretty heavy cover. I will be using a 3/8 ounce weight, something like this, something fairly compact, and I'm going to put a bobber stopper on it as well. The idea here is, with this particular bait, is it has a lot of little arms that will do this on the way down. Now, that's good, because it may attract the fish and simulate a bluegill. One of the things about the brush hog is, with all these appendages, is that if you throw them in there, in the heavy cover, it can get stuck on the way down. So sometimes, this is not the best bait to throw, and the fish will tell you, but if you're having troubles throwing that bait, then change up. And here, I have a Zoom Z-Craw. It's a pretty good size. I think it's 4.5 inches long. It's more compact. It still has arms or legs that'll little flutter on the way down, but it's more compact and won't get hung up as much. Again, you'll see I'm going for the purples and browns, so I'm definitely going after the bluegill. And I'll probably also take this and I'll probably dip the tail slightly at the very tip with some chartreuse. It's a little bit larger bait, 3/8 ounce weight, let's say, and a bobber stopper. If you get bit on that and then you're not getting enough bites, sometimes you just got to downsize. This is a reaction innovation bait, and again, it's brown and purple. You can see what I'm going for here. It's a little smaller bait. I might still use 3/8 ounce, but I might go down to 1/4 ounce depending. It'll also get into the heavy cover pretty good. These are a few baits that are just really good to try when you're flipping and pitching. I'm going a little bit bigger baits because I want the little bit bigger bite, and that's what I'm after in the tournament. If I don't get the bigger bites, then I downsize and away I go. There's another totally different style of bait that I think is absolutely worth trying, especially when you're fishing when you're fishing vertically, I should say. And that's the J-rig. Notice the weight is right here. When I throw this in there, this bait will have a tendency on slack line just to go straight down. And sometimes that's exactly what you want. I am using here a Yamamoto swim tail Cinco, and if you'll notice, I've got the tail colored with a little chartreuse, perfect bluegill imitation. And also what I find interesting when I speculate is that when this is dropping like that, this bait is chasing after this worm, this fish, this bluegill is chasing after something else. So I think that's what it is. The rod I'm using for this is the St. Croix Legend Tournament Power Finesse. It is a 7'3" rod. It's a heavy power with an extra fast tip. I love the extra fast tip and this power of this rod for pitching very light baits into pretty heavy cover. I think this rod is a beautiful pitching rod for cover that's not super heavy. So I'll have this one on my deck along with my 7'11" power flipping rod when I go into the jungle trying to fish vertical. This rod will also be the perfect rod to use for this next bait, which is very unusual. It's a Yamamoto, I'm not sure, it's a Nico something, I believe. It is a big, short, fat, stubby Cinco style bait, if you will. It's got a big fat tail and a big wide body. I love how this bait works. So if you notice, I have it rigged on a hook that has a weight, slightly weighted, and I move that weight way back to the back of this hook. Now that's a Mustad style hook. You can get them at Tackle Warehouse, or you probably go right to the Mustad website to get these. I've done one other thing here, is I've dyed the tail blue. When this goes in the water, I throw it, and again, I'm going to use the Power Finesse rod. I'm going to throw it out there, and I'm going to give it slack line, and this bait's going to kind of do this kind of stuff. It's going to sink, it's going to circle, this tail is going to be doing this, and it's going to be just kind of doing this kind of stuff, which is exactly like a bait fish trying to go to the bottom. Now when I pop it, I'll let it sink, and I'll pop, 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 I'll do that. When that happens, this tail kicks in, and it's like doo-doo, doo-doo-doo. So this is an incredibly great looking bait when I throw it in the pool, okay? Now the question is, can I and will I get bites? I love the size, I love that it's fat. To me, this is definitely simulating a bluegill. Maybe a color change, I might have to get some other colors, but I think this is really, really effective. Another technique you can use in the jungle, by the way, is just fishing finesse worms on very light weight. I had the opportunity 3 years ago now to fish in September with Gary Simph. He is an incredible fisherman. He's in the Midweek Bass Club, and he is an Arizona guide fisherman. He fishes finesse worms all the time, and on this particular trip, we just caught the heck out of them up in the jungle on little worms. So here's a little finesse worm, okay? You can see that this happens to be a pretty skinny little worm, all right? It happens, the brand, by the way, is a floating worm, something I'm trying. It's a really great color. It's, you know, green watermelon, purple and green fleck. And you would pair this up with a Texas style, probably with a bobber stopper, fishing on 10 or 12 pound test line. And this little worm is incredible sometimes when they're a little finicky and they're not willing to take those big baits I was telling you about. There's a few other products here I really like. This is the KVD, Strike King KVD worm. What I love about these is just the shape, okay? This worm happens to be 5 inches long. It's a little meaty up on the head, and it has this really cool little tail. And I love that tail because when when it drops, it kind of does this on the way down, and when you lift it up and pop it, it kicks it. So I really like that, and I like the smaller size, right? Because it's definitely finessey. And here's the thing, right? I'm going to fish this in areas where I can actually make casts. So instead of throw them right into the bushes, I'm going to throw in the open areas in between the bushes. Sometimes you'll have pathways, right, where you don't see any bushes, but what's underneath is also just flooded brush. It's just you can't see it. So that's a great place to throw. Cover a lot of water, try to identify where the fish are, and then work it. How do you work it? The same way. You throw it out there, and you just bring it back, okay? The goal here with these baits, they're finessey, but a little smaller and lighter head, and you just give them something that they want to eat if they're not eating the big stuff. So there you have it, how I would fish the jungle at Roosevelt Lake with horizontal baits and with vertical baits. I'm going to have to make some adjustments, there's no doubt. I've spent a lot of time talking about bluegill. Well, there's also massive amounts of shad probably up in the jungle, right? I didn't really talk about that because I'm trying to go after the fish that are eating bluegills, because bluegills are bigger and I think I can catch bigger fish. I don't know. Sometimes you just need to go after the fish that are eating whatever they're eating, and they might be eating shad. And let's not forget, Roosevelt has gizzard shad, which are big, so, you know, maybe a regular spinnerbait might be fine, okay? So keep that in mind. I want to thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe and like this video. Hope you join me. Please subscribe. Please like this video, and have a great day.